Dilek, welcome to Tibetttv's program on Tibet support groups. Today we will discuss on Lungta Active for Tibet based in Belgium. Lungta Active for Tibet is an information and activist platform dedicated to the political, social and cultural rights of the Tibetan people. They support the Tibetan right for self-determination and endorse non-violent struggle and peaceful resistance. To discuss more on Lungta, I have with me its president, Mr. Han. Welcome to Tibettv, Mr. Han.
Tashidele, good morning. Thank you very much for this invitation and the opportunity to discuss a bit more about our group.
Mr. Han, first of all, tell us about the genesis of your organization and the reason behind the adoption of Lungta as your organization's name, and how many members are there in your organization so far?
Okay, so we are a relatively young TSG. We were officially established in 2012. We work on a 100% voluntary basis, and we all have regular day jobs. So, although we are a young group, our core team has been supporting Tibet in different ways since the turn of the millennium. So we've been around for some time. I think Lungta became the natural result of our support for Tibet, and I like to see it as a sort of continuation of Tibet support in Belgium, which started in the early 90s. Unfortunately, many groups like Les Amis du Tibet and Friends of Tibet decided to stop their operation after many years. So it's up to us now to continue the support. Why did we adopt the name Lungta? I think the Lungta prayer flags are one of the most recognizable symbols of Tibetan culture. Many people know them and love them, hang them in their gardens. So in the same fashion as a prayer flag who spreads the prayers across the world, we like to spread the message of the Tibetan freedom struggle here in Belgium. As for members, we are not a membership group, so maybe we are not consider ourselves a traditional support group. We see ourselves more as a sort of collective and a platform for the Tibetan cause with a more loose structure, and we take a general project-based approach. But we do have a wide network. We use mailing lists, social media to get our message across. So.
Okay, Mr. Han, since your organization is a platform for information and activists dedicated to the political and social and cultural rights of Tibetan people, tell us about what kinds of activities your organization undertake for the cause of Tibet. And another question is, what major challenges do you face while carrying out those activities?
Okay, yes. Well, we have a wide range of activities. We generally focus on regional advocacy work and political campaigning. But in the past, we also organized cultural events, like for the occasion of Losar, sort of encounter to Tibetan culture and traditions for a much wider audience. But as mentioned, our focus is more on the political. So we try to participate in demonstrations, whether it is as a co-organizer or supporting on practical level or merely attending. So we always try to be involved in the 10 March rally in Belgium, but also on a European level, like the Europe Stands with Tibet campaign we had in Paris and Geneva. We always offer our services for what it's worth, of course. In the past, we organized rallies against the visit of Xi Jinping in 2014, and most recently, we were a co-organizer of the Global Day of Action on October 1st. That was a coalition with Tibet groups, World Uyghur Congress, and representatives of Taiwan and Hong Kong. We focus a lot on campaigning, as I mentioned. So we focus on Confucius Institutes, Tashi Wangchuk, Panchen Lama in the last couple of years. So how do we go about it? We put a lot of time and effort in letter writing campaigns, especially to politicians and other stakeholders linked to certain campaigns. We always launch writing campaigns to political prisoners, found that very important. And on a more larger scale, we take part in city festivals, different fairs and markets. So we have a more general outreach, a more wider audience with more interaction. And we also try to publish articles in the Dutch language press to get our message across. As for challenges, it's not always easy to get the message of Tibet across to the people and grab their attention, because it's something in a far distant land. Many people don't know what it's about. So you have to keep your message simple but to the point, and you have to find some, I think, common ground with your audience so they can relate to a certain topic or to a certain campaign. So we try to do that in a creative way, in an interactive way, sometimes a bit playful, even though it's serious subjects. It's nice you can have some playful, interactive campaigns to get your audience involved and enthusiastic about it. Of course, getting real political support is definitely a challenge. Tibet is generally not high on the political agenda. So it's up to us to keep informing our representatives from the local to the federal level. Sympathy is great, but we need more tangible support, and not just lip service, as they call it. And then a third major challenge, and I think that's something that many groups are struggling with, is finding new and active members. We are sort of the younger generation of Tibet supporters, but we are generally in our late 30s, early 40s, so I'm a bit concerned what the future will hold in that respect. So.
Okay, Mr. Han, as you said that your organization focuses more on political activities, particularly campaigning against Confucius Institutes. So my question is on this note. As you know that Chinese government is manipulating international community through so-called Confucius Institutes, and your organization carries out lots of activities against it. So question is, how successful has your organization become in terms of campaigning against Confucius Institutes?
We didn't succeed in closing down institutions ourselves, but I think we did contribute to the debate here in our country by addressing our concerns to the political world. But at the end of the day, whether or not a university chooses to collaborate with a Confucius Institute, it is an autonomous decision. So the political department of education can only give its advice on the matter. But I think we had contributed to getting this message across about the reputation of the real face of the Confucius Institute. But anyway, we were lucky, as the Confucius Institute here in the Free University of Brussels was compromised due to a case of espionage. So by its former director, and the cooperation has terminated. This is something we see across Europe and America. I mean, the reputation of the Confucius Institute are severely damaged. They lost all credibility. So that problem is kind of resolving itself without doing much campaigning about it. So that is a good thing about it. But it's a difficult target, the Confucius Institute. So it's still a work in progress.
Okay, Mr. Han, your organization also works on publishing articles and disseminate information of the Tibetan cause in local and national magazines. So how effective are these publications, and what about responses from the public?
Yeah, well, it's definitely one of our objectives in trying to get articles out there in Dutch language publications. We generally get published in more specialized magazines, so these are not necessary publications for a wider audience, but rather for readers with an interest in this type of topics and global conflicts in general. So in that way, they are more receptive for our message. On the other hand, we also publish more articles campaign related. So that way you can reach out to a completely new audience with no specific ties to Tibet, but through a common link, like, for example, language. We can get people's attention on the case of Tashi Wangchuk or the assault on Tibetan language in general. So, yeah, we get a lot of positive responses. First and foremost, of course, by the editorial boards. If they wouldn't like it, they wouldn't publish, of course. But also from the common readers and Tibet colleagues. Definitely, yeah, we get the message across. It's worth the effort, no doubt, and it is something I enjoy doing myself personally. So.
Okay, Mr. Han, your organization also believes and supports Tibetan cause based on non-violence. How effective do you think the role of non-violent movement for the Tibetan people's struggle?
I think the role of nonviolence has been a continuation of overall support for the Tibetan cause. Of course, when you live in a free democratic country with rule of law and respect for its citizens, it is of course easy to say you believe 100% in nonviolence. If you are yourself confronted with a certain violent situation, it's of course difficult to say how one would react. But in general, I think the movement should continue both inside and outside on the nonviolent path. I think nonviolence has been even more important for the survival of Tibetan culture and traditions. I think after decades of repression, after democratic reforms, collectivism, cultural revolutions and whatnot, the Tibetan culture is still alive and thriving. And I think that's the merit of the nonviolence resistance. People sometimes think nonviolence means passivity, but I think nonviolence asks real courage. So I can only have tremendous respect for the Tibetan people. I think if the resistance inside Tibet would turn violent, it would give China the excuse to strike even harder than it has, with unforeseen consequences.
Okay, Mr. Han, before we wrap up our discussion, I would like to ask you a very interesting question. Wherever His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama visits, his message of love, compassion and kindness is always loud and clear. So how relevant do you think is the message of His Holiness in today's world?
Well, today the message of His Holiness is more than relevant. I think it's fair to say we live in quite crazy times. So I think his message of love and compassion is a sort of necessary antidote against all the ruthlessness and negativity we are facing in our world and our society today. I think his legacy will outlive him as a person and will be a source of inspiration for generations to come. So His Holiness is definitely key in our global world today for some positivity, and he puts a smile on everybody's face. So no more, I cannot say anymore.
Thank you so much. With this, we're going to end our discussion here. I would like to thank Mr. Han for joining our program. Thank you so much.
The pleasure was all mine. Tashi Dele.